This is Comic Geek Speak, episode 1757, Star Wars, The Rise of Skywalker movie review. I'm Adam Murdo.
I'm Shane Kelly.
And I'm Chris Eberly. All right, welcome to the show, one and all. As we gather here in the CGS studio, all three of us live and in person.
Brother, it's just an honor to be here at home again.
It's an honor to have you, Chris.
Back in the saddle.
You made the trick across how many parsecs of distance? Even though
I
it's
must
not...
say, the usual feeling of a wasteland, the route here was exacerbated by the terrible weather today.
Yeah.
So,
Really
Yeah,
felt
it
like you
has
were
been
navigating the outer rim territories, I'm sure.
badly drizzled.
Yes,
overall, it was gusty. I've been fighting a cold
it was
all week.
badly
Stopped at
drizzly.
CVS for
You
Advil.
sounded just a little bit.
My apologies to the listeners.
Nah.
But I feel better because we have Amigo Aquaman in the studio. And I made a point, and Shane was my accomplice here, in having him swim around the table as we did our introduction. Now he's perched rather daintily.
Yeah.
Yep.
No, he's definitely daintily. He's got his legs crossed. He's suntanning. Although he's got Spock ears, which I never really noticed
Look
before.
at that.
pointed Spock ears on the Aquaman Mego.
Something in his body language makes me think of like a 70s showgirl or
Well, I was thinking 50s surfer comedy.
like Liza Minnelli in Cabaret or Shirley MacLaine in something.
Good, or
Thinking
as Shane was saying,
kitchen.
beach blanket bingo or something.
Yeah,
Yeah, whatever it's called.
Bingo.
Oh, Annette Funicello.
Yeah.
Brothers, it's good to see you both. Looking forward to this.
Yes, as we share our thoughts on the concluding chapter in the latest Star Wars trilogy, The Rise of Skywalker,
Indeed.
episode 9.
Nyan.
Aye, but before we do that, we've got a bit of holiday cheer to spread here.
That's
Yes.
Because we get to open up our CGS mailbag and take a look at the bit of
Oh, look at that card.
holiday largesse, let's call it.
Never necessary, but very appreciated.
Sent to us by our good friend Eamon Clark, Caliban from the forums, who for years has sent us presents
And years.
at his own expense
Yes.
from
Yeah.
across the
Yeah.
pond, accompanied with a card this time. And
Buscema Silver Surfer, issue 1. Beautiful.
Yep, that's the artwork on the front of the card. And within it says, "To the CGS crew, Merry Christmas and thank you for another year of podcast entertainment, as well as the usual 2000 AD goodies. I also include some copies of a new UK comic magazine for some studio reading. Cheers, Eamon. The Doctor Who sends some presents."
Well, thank you, sir.
Usual for my kids' Ben and Matt, which is always
Yep,
appreciated.
some fine geeky gift wrapping as per usual.
Nice. There's 4 issues of Comic Scene. That'll be cool. He always gets the best paper.
Oh, yeah, you do mention that every year. Yep.
Yeah.
Thrill to Captain Britain returns. It's
One from Brian. One for Ian.
the funny pages. I recognize that cartooned Frankenstein. He was part of the British Comics Treasury Free Comic Book Day issue that came out this past year.
Ragtime Soldier, Pat Mills' new World War I tale.
Right?
And Chris.
Oh, thank you. Murd, proceed. You can go first.
They came with tags.
They did come with tags.
Yes, he attached little string tags to each one. To Adam, Happy Christmas. Yes, it said Happy Birthday originally. He crossed out birthday and wrote in Christmas. And Happy Christmas being in keeping with the British idiom for the greetings of the season.
He really does get the best paper every year.
Yep. We've got this wrapping paper is sort of turquoise in color, and it's got Daleks saying "exterminate" in little word balloons, and Cybermen saying "delete, delete, delete." Right, so I am opening the one addressed to me. It is, of course, a 2000 AD hardcover. Oh, And I see Eamon is since he got such good feedback from me from last year's gift, he decided to give me the second
Nice.
volume of that same series. It's Grant Morrison and Steve Yoel's Zenith Phase 2.
Great cover.
Awesome.
Wow.
Yes, last year I got to thrill to it. Zenith is a superhero story, after all. It's about a young superhero in 1980s UK who is using he's a second-generation superhero. His parents were a part of a group called Cloud9, who were active back in the 60s. They were young, idealistic super beings of the hippie generation who actually wanted to make a difference in the world. But as part of the 80s me generation, young Zenith just wanted to use his powers to self-aggrandize and to make money as a celebrity, kind of a pop idol. And he would go on talk shows and such and didn't do much actual crime fighting except where it was necessary to promote his career. But the events of Phase 1 kind of thrust him into a position where he needed to be a bit more heroic and even act in tandem with some members of his parents' generation to fight off an extra-dimensional threat. And now we move on to Phase 2. I've been led to understand that eventually there is sort of a parallel Earth dimension added to the story. So I'm looking forward to get to that point. And, well, thank you very much, Eamon, for giving me a chance to experience the continuing adventures of Zenith. And I devoured the first volume almost as soon as I received it from you, and I'll probably do the same with this one.
That's great.
All right, see what I got here.
I love being tantalized with a alternate Earth.
Right. Charlie's War, Volume 2, Brothers in Arms.
Yes, the S in Charlie is backwards, I noticed. So that
These are, he gave me, I think it was last year, he sent me Charlie's War Part 1.
Very cool.
And these are fantastic military comics. The artwork is gorgeous. The attention to detail, the authenticity. Eamon, thank you very much. This is a fantastic gift.
And that's something that you can only find over there, overseas?
Well, they're British comics. I would assume so. I can't say for sure he would know that. But these are reprints from comics from the early 80s. And they're so well done. So, thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
seems like there's a pretty strong element of humor in them. Am I reading that right?
Yes. Yeah, it's... The first one, I read it quite a while ago, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. And the people who do this really have done their homework. But yeah, there's definitely a the rendering of the artwork. There's definitely that humorous element to it. But you know, they're still war comics. So
yeah,
I really appreciate this. Thank you.
Very cool.
There's even most of these 2000 AD stories are in glorious black and white, but I noticed a couple.
Yeah,
color
a couple of
pages
color in there.
Now it's Shady Poo.
Survival Geeks. Oh, nice. Gordon Rennie and Emma Beebe. Artist Neil Good. Surviving Geeks created by those people I just mentioned. Looks very cool. Sci-fi goodness. Geeky stuff, fantasy things. Let's see. When student Sam wakes up in the house of a group of obsessive sci-fi fans, she becomes their reluctant new housemate after their home gets transformed into a piece of misfiring transdimensional technology. That sounds awesome. Definitely by 2000 AD, which is always appreciated. This looks fantastic. Thank you very much.
And
I
that
can't
is
wait.
full color.
It is full color. Wow. Making some mock fun of Star Wars on the cover already.
Yeah, I noticed that too.
Yeah. And then there's stuff in there for Ben and Matt, stuff in there for the Deemer clan and Ian and Pants. So we'll make sure we pass that along to them as well.
Absolutely.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
I absolutely love it.
By the way, speaking of Christmas, Murd, I want to acknowledge how much I enjoyed your rendering of Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer.
I did not listen to that yet.
Well, thank you very much, Chris. It's just something I thought I should do to acknowledge the anniversary of the character across all media.
Well, it was,
Before there was the song with the animated special we all know and love, there was this little giveaway for the Montgomery Ward department store.
well, I really appreciate that history. Plus, I hadn't checked the feed in a couple of days of the holidays, so when I was driving up here, I said, let's see, put on some podcasts. Like, Murd recorded another Christmas-themed episode. I was giddy in the front seat of my car. I'm sure passers-by were like, what is wrong with this guy? I mean, like, kind of gyrating with glee in my driver's seat. But
Happy to inspire that fit of Eberlean glee, Chris.
But it was a delight. I mean, it's only 10 minutes. I mean, it's very short, but I was unfamiliar with the history of Rudolph. I didn't realize that's where he first originated.
Mm-hmm.
So great. So Shane, definitely going to listen on the way home.
Yeah. That'll be awesome.
All right, ready to talk about
Star Wars.
the latest epic?
Sure.
Rise of Skywalker.
Yes. Let me ask you guys a question before we start.
Yeah.
I've had the sense, maybe this Murr, did you have some misgivings going into this movie? You did, didn't you?
Yeah, I tended to forget that it was even coming out, which I think is probably a sign of my subconscious sending me messages that you don't really want to go see this movie. Stop being aware of its existence. You'll sleep better at night.
Wow.
But yeah, I was able to kind of clear my mind, reach out with my feelings, and just go in there without too much malice aforethought, without too many initial prejudices, and just try to and appreciate the thing for what it was.
And did that happen for you?
Appreciation is probably not quite the right word.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I have mixed feelings about it. I'm pretty sure when we get when Ian gets a chance to share his thoughts, he'll say about the same thing. Probably not for the same reasons, but I know his reaction was kind of mixed as well. But there were bits that I liked. There were cool moments. But the problem was that's kind of all the movie was to me. It was just kind of like a unruly heap of cool moments that didn't have much of a story spine to link them together into a cohesive narrative.
Okay.
But pacing and plot structure were kind of a big problem for me. And some of the creative choices resonated well. Others just felt a bit like pandering. Still others left me scratching my head. It didn't gel together very well. Just even putting aside my sentiments as a fan, as a more or less objective critic of film, if I can call myself that, it just wasn't a very well put together movie.
Okay. Shani Poo, your initial thoughts?
Well, I'll say I loved it. I do have problems with it, but I choose not to nitpick those because I went in there with very low expectations because I was not thrilled with The Last Jedi.
Mm-hmm.
There's
Yeah.
I in The Last Jedi I liked the Rey and Luke parts and I liked the Kylo Ren parts well enough, and I even liked the little bit of Snoke parts you got. That part of the movie I enjoyed. I could have cared less about what was happening with the rebellion. I thought that was terrible. I thought the casino was horrible. I thought the whole reason that they were chasing the First Order's chasing after the rebellion and they couldn't do anything but stay so far apart just to annoy them. Like, how do you catch them? We'll go faster. Like, I'm not trying to get too much into that, but I really didn't like a good half of that movie. It was weird, stupid. So I went in just to be entertained and to draw a good enough conclusion to what's been put out there to entertain me. And that it did. Plot holes aside, story pacing was a problem. I thought everything was squished together, but I still enjoyed it. I still want to see it again. I still came out satisfied enough that I want them to move in a different direction now from this point forward.
I saw the film twice, and I went to see it last night for the second time, so it'd be fresh on my mind for our discussion today. Having said that, and I no way do I mean this as a negative, it's just the way I feel at this point. If we weren't talking about this today, I wouldn't have gone to see it a second time.
Yeah.
Now, having said that, I enjoyed the film. Now, why did I enjoy it? Because I went into it looking to watch a Star Wars movie, and I got a Star Wars movie.
Yeah.
Not the movies that I grew up with. I hold those in a different class, basically. For what they've been doing since, I went in not with a chip on my shoulder. You know, I'm getting too old now. I just don't care anymore about all the fan angst. Like, whatever, it's a film. But I had fun.
Yeah.
And in fact, when I saw it the second time, I had even more fun. Having said that, I'm sure I'm going to probably agree with a lot of the sentiments you guys are going to share here about what was done. The one thing I'll say right off the bat, which kind of captures in a nutshell how I feel about these movies, and use the word pandering before.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoy all the new ones they've done. I've enjoyed them all to varying degrees, but where not that it falls flat for me, but it's just like, all right, it is what it is. Because it's such a massive property, there's no pushing of the envelope really at all. And especially the Abrams films, you basically just redid movies that were already done.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Even in some cases, beat for beat in certain scenes. And I understand to a degree why they would do that. But as to go back to what Murph was saying, as someone who really loves movies or the movies and film, that gets old for me after a while. I'd be more interested to see other things. In fact, when I see them do that, I get more excited about things like The Mandalorian, for example.
Oh yeah, and that's where I appreciate what The Last Jedi tried to do, because it was different,
absolutely.
very different than the first and the third one. I just didn't buy the way they did some of it, but other parts of it were fantastically done. But yeah, this one, much like The Force Awakens, was very similar to things that have already happened, beat for beat, scene for scene, character for character.
And to be fair to, J.J. Abrams, a director I've always enjoyed, and the creator and so forth, how much of that as well, we have to do this fan service, because if we don't, people are going to be vocal and be unhappy.
And I don't.
And how much of it is intimidation? I don't know.
I don't care about whether everyone's happy or not, because again, you're never going to please everybody. But some of it, I think they went into a corner with the way The Last Jedi ended. And then some of it is what happened in real life, where you had Han Solo and Luke Skywalker now dead, but you had Princess Leia alive. But in the real world, it's the opposite. Mm-hmm. And how do you fix all that in a way that makes sense and doesn't seem extremely forced or stupid? And I actually thought they did that very well.
I thought they did it well. I didn't think it seemed forced at all.
With the way Carrie Fisher and Princess Leia's character was, I thought it was brilliantly done in this movie. So I was very pleased with that. Not that I thought they would do anything terrible. I couldn't figure out how they were going to make it make sense, and I thought they did a
what
great job.
About that, and I agree with you, is so they obviously filmed these scenes
for The Last Jedi.
And so I was just wondering, in what context would they have worked in The Last Jedi, right?
Yeah.
That's just interesting. Just,
Yep.
where would have those scenes have worked? Because they worked seamlessly, I thought, in what the story they were telling in
the
new film.
And considering The Last Jedi, for the most part, happened before she passed away. All the filming was done. I wonder where they would have been cut into if they would have kept them, or just how much did they rearrange. But I thought they did a good job with it.
Okay, let's start with some of the big themes. So what did we think about the Emperor being the big bad again?
I was okay with it for what they were doing, because it allowed them to answer some questions that came up in the first two episodes.
Snoke and where does it come from? Oh, he's a clone in a tube.
And
that's one of the things that one of the curveballs that Rian Johnson threw in The Last Jedi that they felt they had to accept.
Yeah.
Picking their battles, if you will. They walked back the reveal about Rey, but the reveal about Snoke, they decided they were just going to embrace. Yeah. And so they really leaned hard into the idea of Snoke just being a construct, and they showed us that scene you were alluding to, Chris, of a whole bunch of dead Snokes in a in a vat in the Emperor's stronghold.
And some of that I'm okay with, because in I know they don't base this on anything in the movies, but in tons of books and comics and stuff that came before Disney took over, the Emperor had clones of himself.
Oh, sure, the Dark Horse comics.
Yeah, that's been a part of the expanded universe lore of Star Wars for years. So that wasn't too jarring.
I didn't mind
easy
them
enough for us to accept.
Playing around for that. In fact, that's part of what I think they should have done for the Clone Wars in Episode 2 was Palpatine, the Chancellor, should have been a clone of Palpatine, the Dark Lord, so that the Jedi wouldn't figure out who he is, so that there's a puppet master controlling the puppet, and actually they should have had a couple other key clones in places to really make you not trust everybody and make that the Clone Wars. Because
Shane, nice plot device.
That's exactly what from day one. That's what I thought, and I was terribly disappointed that they didn't even come close to that. I thought that's such a simple thing to think about.
They could have told us that it was actually a clone that Darth Vader chucked down the power core of Death Star.
Yeah, and I'm kind of glad it's not, because I like that he died well enough or close enough and has been
for now
kept alive all these years, just as a barely alive body with this machinery keeping him alive.
A Voldemort-like shade of his former self.
Yeah. So I didn't mind that at all, and I didn't need an explanation for who Snoke was, because when Return of the Jedi came out, you had no explanation of who the Emperor was. He's just the guy that Darth Vader threw down the shaft. All right, well, that's great. That's all I needed as Snoke.
Darth Vader's boss. He'd been mentioned once or twice, and
You
suddenly
see
that was
briefly
person.
in Empire Strikes Back.
So I didn't need any more, but I don't mind that they gave us one in the end chapter here. I know a lot of people were up in arms about that, but in The Last Jedi, but it's the same thing as the Emperor was in Jedi. It doesn't matter. He was a plot device to get Rey and Ben to do something together to move the story along. So I didn't mind I didn't mind the clone part of that. What I actually thought that whole beginning scene was, I thought that was going to be Kylo Ren dreaming it, still communicating, like the Emperor is reaching out and communicating with him, but I thought he was going to wake up in bed and then go find where the Emperor was. So not a big twist, but just that everything was really happening versus a dream of it happening and then him going to find him.
I was a bit surprised that they came right out and said, "Hey, the Emperor's back" in the opening text crawl.
Yep.
I thought they would leave us to discover that as the plot unfolded,
Yeah,
but that's
yeah.
the very first thing we learn about what this movie is going to be, is that Palpatine's back.
Yep, and then he put a message out there, and everyone's ooh. Oh.
Plus, they made it clear in the trailers that
Oh yeah,
he was going to
yeah.
be in the film. What did we think about the way they dealt with Kylo Ren's character arc at the end of this trilogy?
I think he's one of the few characters in this series who really did complete an arc.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree.
And it was fairly well done. I would have liked for him to have a little more to say about what he'd undergone because for most of the last part of his time on screen before he perished, he really didn't have very much dialogue. He said, "Ouch!" at one point. You could hear his dad coming through.
Oh, yeah.
in that.
Yeah.
But yeah, he fights his Knights of Ren. He goes up against the Emperor. He gets thrown down the shaft as the Emperor himself had.
Yep.
He climbs back up, which we all saw coming, and then that little bit with Rey, and then he fades away into.
Yeah, which I read some things where people have a problem with him and her kissing, and that was forced.
But it was.
I don't. You know what? I don't think it was, because they established in the previous movie there was an attraction between them.
Absolutely, and that's what I was going to say. There's precedent in The Last Jedi that they have a strong connection. It's just that Rey couldn't do what she wanted to do with him at that point because he was nowhere close to being Ben at that point. I actually I'm sure there were others doing it, but I was doing it, I think, more than anybody else that I noticed. There's the scene on the moon of Endor, or wherever they were around there.
It wasn't the forest moon.
It wasn't the forest moon, but it was another moon.
I was hoping for Ewoks, although we did get them
we
later.
did get them at the end, where Rey and Kylo Ren are battling, and the waves are crashing all over, and then she runs away to go find the Emperor. And you hear, "Hey, kid," and I thought, "Oh my God."
Yeah, I
Oh my
wasn't
God,
expecting that.
It's him.
Yep.
No, I wasn't either. I was hoping at some point they'd get all three original heroes on screen together, which still never happened. But when that happened, I lost it. But I mean, again, father-son stuff.
Yep, we know your
But
weaknesses
oh my God,
there, Shane.
I absolutely loved that they wrote Princess Leia to give everything she possibly could, not to turn Ben. It was just to snap him out of what he was doing, and allowed him to hear Han Solo. Not that Han Solo was a Force ghost. I mean, he said himself, I'm just a memory in your head. But it gave a scene that I was hoping to have in the movie. Just like The Empire Strikes Back with, "Hey, I love you." Yeah, I know. It was a very similar scene. So that's one of the scenes in this one that I didn't mind duplicating. I was okay with it. And I loved Ben's arc to fruition at the end.
Do you think that he had to die?
Yes, yeah, I do.
Too.
And
He
I think
killed too many people.
and I think
there's no going back from that.
exactly. I think Rey is the only one that would have accepted him at that point. I don't think anybody else, from Finn to Poe to anybody else, would have accepted him. But the important part,
That would have struck a nice little sour note at the end of this trilogy that might set up what the next trilogy is going to be.
it could be.
All about Ben's further redemption and all that business with the Force dyad the two of them were supposed to represent. That potential was kind of squandered by having him die.
Well, but to me, it's important to note that while Rey accepted him at that point, and he certainly did redeem himself in turn on the Emperor, on everything he was being evil about, everything he thought he was doing, the more important thing is the Force accepted him.
Right.
Because he faded away, which is more than
Because
could
he
be said
faded away.
of his grandfather. So in a way,
Yeah.
he did succeed where his grandfather had failed.
Yeah. Well, and some of that we only saw. I mean, I know that when he died on the ship on the Death Star when they were trying to escape, he didn't fade away at that point. But we only saw his armor get burned. We didn't see his body. So I still wonder if he didn't fade away at some point. It's just not as instantaneous as what we were used to or what they showed us.
I guess it's possible. I mean, we saw Leia's body didn't fade away until the moment that Ben's did.
Exactly. So there's something for me in my mind that, yeah, the Force accepted Anakin Skywalker just as much as it now has Ben Solo. And I'm okay with that. That's exactly what I wanted to happen. If he had to die and he died doing something by sacrificing himself to save her, Rey, the Force still accepted him.
We also have to consider, looking at it from a more sort of mundane political perspective, if, let's say, Vader had survived, like, Luke, come with me, or if Ben had survived, as we were just saying, they murdered Darth Vader was the Stalin, basically, of that galaxy.
Sure.
He murdered so many, and Kylo Ren killed tons of people,
Oh, yeah.
too.
Yeah.
I mean, he cut down Max von Sydow's character in the first movie.
Yep.
There's no way he's ever going to be accepted.
No, by everybody.
It's not, there's too much blood on his hands, and there's too much darkness there. So I thought it made sense.
I did too. But I absolutely loved his story from the first minute we saw him in The Force Awakens to the last second we saw him in this one. I thought he had a better arc than most of the other characters.
Well, back to the point I was making when you talk about the main characters, and this is again, it's not my gripe. It's just I accept these movies for what they are, but also for what they're not. In that, because in many ways they were simply reiterating what already had been done, just the new characters and new names. I mean, Oscar Isaac for me is one of the most dynamic actors working in films today. I love his movies. I think he's a great actor.
Mm-hmm.
He's a warmed over Han Solo.
He is.
He's even a spy. They find he's a spice runner at the end.
Yeah. Well,
You know,
and the only time I really loved his character without question is The Force Awakens. I didn't think they used him very well in the last two movies, other than to say in the third movie now they've made them all realize they need each other to complete and win. But overall, they did not use his character very well in the last two movies. He was actually kind of whiny in a lot of it.
It seems like his function in The Last Jedi was mainly to be angry at Admiral Holdo.
Yeah.
He was a little better in this one, I think.
Yeah, he was. But, yeah, I agree.
But yeah, and Chris, you're absolutely right. He is a warmed-over Han Solo. He's the swashbuckling, irreverent type, which is, in a character like that, is necessary to a Star Wars film, I think, because that's one thing that the prequel trilogy was lacking.
Oh, there's no humor.
And it felt pretty soulless as a result.
So airless. What do you think of Finn's arc?
I thought he did better, and I'm glad they wrote him the way they did in this one.
Yeah, in the last one, they didn't know what to do with him.
Yeah.
So they used him as a semi-buffoonish comedy relief, and they gave him that really pointless casino side mission with Rose.
Drag the film. Yeah.
But you fixed that whole casino scene for me, and this would have fixed a good chunk of that movie if they found Lando in that casino.
Which
That
we all
fixed it.
were expecting,
Yeah.
of course.
Yep.
What do we feel about Finn clearly being force sensitive?
I'm okay with that.
I think that's very
because
interesting.
you have
Yeah.
Maz Kanat, is that her name?
I think that is, yeah.
She's force sensitive. There's other people out there that are force sensitive, so I think that makes perfect sense. I mean, that's partially why he was drawn to do what he did in Force Awakens and wield the lightsaber a little bit. And I know Kylo Ren was injured when he fought him, but he still got a couple licks in. Yeah, I kind of expected. I was hoping. I didn't want him to be full on Force like Rey is with the Force, but I wanted him to come.
Yeah, I don't want anybody to be quite as full on, as Rey was.
Yeah,
without proper training and all of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it would have been nice if they'd been even more explicit about it with Finn. Like I was kind of hoping that we'd see some signs that, like maybe Rey proposing to start up a new Jedi Order or something, and having him be one of her first recruits.
I think that's open for down the road, possibly, which is what I'm hoping later. I want something else next, but down the road, I wouldn't mind
here's
seeing
my
it.
question, though, piggybacking off that. What the hell was he going to say to her?
He was either going to say he was force sensitive, or he was going to say
I
that
love you.
he knew.
Yeah.
He was not
her
going to say "I
lineage.
love you."
Okay.
He was going to say either that he's force sensitive or his lineage, or her lineage. One of the two.
I was expecting the latter.
Yeah, I was too. I was expecting to find out that he and Leia had a conversation because Leia may have known that he's a little force sensitive and said, "Hey, Ray," because he said, to Poe, he said, "You don't know what she's struggling with." So that told me that he knew something, even if he just felt it, even without Leia's discussion.
So-
But I wouldn't take it as he being that sensitive.
I'm glad, Shane. I was like crawling in the darkness. You reached out a hand. You pulled me the light because
Reach out in the darkness,
look at me.
and you may find a friend.
Oh, look at me with the fist thrust.
I think it's so groovy now. The geeks are finally getting together.
because because I went right to the always wants to say lover, which is such
Yeah, no.
a and yours is far more intuitive and astute.
Now that may have been in the
it.
first movie. He had a thing for her in the first movie, but that's because he never had anybody treat him or care for him at all.
Yeah.
He's just a stormtrooper
So
all
he
this
just
time.
latched onto the first female person who showed him
Exactly.
a little bit of kindness.
Exactly, and that worked for that movie. But much like Luke and Leia in that first in A New Hope,
Good point.
I didn't think that would continue at all.
So we
And then in
mentioned
the second
sorry,
movie,
Mark,
he
go ahead.
latches onto Rose Tico, and
Well,
in this
actually,
movie,
she latches onto him. He's still trying to save his, by that point, friend Rey. I think that infatuation left for the second movie. I don't think he felt that way in his head. I mean, that's my opinion. I think it was just more to protect her as a friend, as a sister, than anything else.
And he clearly has more chemistry now with the former stormtrooper he met.
right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
By the way, so Lando.
It is hinted that she's his daughter.
Okay, we'll get to that in a second. But
It's a couple of things that could have been hinted by that.
that struck me as a very awkward scene. But
Yes.
what do we think about the way Lando is? Because we're all waiting for Lando to show up in these movies. I thought he'd be in the casino too in the last one.
Yep,
That was a
yep.
letdown.
Since he wasn't in the casino in the last one, I did like how they brought him in this one, and I like how they used him, and I fully appreciated having any minute we have with Lando
I ate it
at
up,
all.
Well, I agree with that, but I don't quite agree that he was used well here. I think he was just tossed in, as so many other things were just kind of tossed in.
Well, so I won't disagree with that to a certain extent, but then I'm thinking I love the explanation of Lando talking to everyone saying, well, Luke and I were out here doing this.
And I like that
I
too.
like that he's had other adventures. So to me, it's that he's never fully been away, but he's been doing other things for the cause all this time. Even if he retired for a little while, that's fine, but Leia could always call in a favor and say, hey, I need your help doing something.
As she did in this last movie. 'cause he
Exactly.
references that, yeah.
So I don't mind that he was just thrown in at this point because it became importantly necessary to throw him in because there's people she trusts, but then there's people she really trusts, and Lando's one of them. So for what they were trying to do and knowing that Lando and Luke were on this path before made sense to me why Leia would have had, hey, Lando, you got to come here and meet these people here and protect them and help them because you've already been partway down this path before with Luke, and they need some help now.
So what do we... When they had him in the scene... what's the girl's name? I'm sorry, the character.
I can't remember.
Oh, Jana, I think.
Okay, when there's in the celebration, he talks to her. The way that was positioned in the scene struck me as very awkward.
It was.
I'm like, are they setting up a show on Disney? Like, what is this? Because it was kind of like out of nowhere. They just kind of
Yeah.
threw this in there, and I'm
Yeah.
like, is he her father? Is he hitting on her? Like, I don't know what's
There-
going on.
Another
with this.
possibility. Would
You
be
know,
very much in
there's-
character for both Lando and Billy D. Williams.
Somewhere there's an article that I read from somebody passing it on to me that said there's a more expanded scene
well, that would make sense.
that gives a little
Yeah.
bit more credence to them discussing and kind of wondering if this is not his daughter that was taken from him. Much like what Carlene, and it's not a bad thing. Back in The Force Awakens, she said, well, maybe Finn's Lando's son that he was stolen from, which
Yeah, sure.
makes...
Why don't we just arrange for all the Black Riders in Star Wars to be related to each other?
But I mean, that was way back when we knew nothing. Now, I didn't expect that, but I applauded her who has very little knowledge of Star Wars beyond what I tell her, to think, well, maybe that would be a thing because of what she noticed between the similarities from A New Hope to The Force Awakens. So for this, I really didn't think they would go that way because it's kind of silly to think that. But yeah, this article said that scene there was an expanded version of that, which had
I wish
more
they
to
put that
it.
in because it would have what they put in for me as a viewer. It felt very clunky. Like it just didn't seem to fit in what was going on.
Yeah.
And let's spitball. Like what do we think is going on there? I mean,
Yeah, but I like that they found another section, another group of defecting
That was cool,
stormtroopers
yeah.
to go along with Finn.
Which
thinking
makes sense,
He's
yeah.
not the only one, which we all I would always assume he's not the only one, but he didn't know that because he's never run into anybody else that didn't just blindly follow the cause.
And they have that rapport now because they had that shared experience.
Yep.
No, I really enjoyed that aspect of the film. Now, I want to get to Murd's take in just a moment because I look forward to criticism like no other Murd. But I have to comment, how cool was it to see, even for just a moment, Wedge?
Yeah. I thought he'd been a little bit longer.
I did too.
I mean, that was like a snap of the finger, but
Yep, another one of those precious little pearls of fan service
Yeah.
thrown in there without much of a string to to unite them into a.
but it was still cool to see him.
Yeah.
I love that the fact that he is Ewan McGregor's uncle
Yes.
as well. I just
Again, they may have filmed a longer scene.
Sure,
We may
sure.
see.
yeah.
So let's hear it, because I can tell you have very mixed feelings about the film. So,
Well, I don't know. Where do you want me to begin?
well, so you went into it with some misgivings, right?
yes.
And were those misgivings justified when you saw the movie, or it wasn't as bad as you thought? Like, what was?
I think my expectations were met. Actually,
Okay.
I wasn't delighted nor disgusted. I went away feeling like I'd been entertained. There were some of the moments that gave me some of the feels, as the kids say. But on the whole, it was just so uneven and disorganized, and I felt like a lot of what had occurred on screen had been kind of superfluous. Like we were talking about how that whole side quest with Rose and Finn was just dead wood that could have been cut out of the movie without much difficulty. I felt like a lot of this movie could have been cut out as well. Like it was mainly like the last act that really mattered. Once they finally got themselves to Exegol and found this Final Order fleet, which is like this volume's Death Star, an entire fleet of Star Destroyers, each of which has planet killer technology on it, because why not?
Yeah.
They even acknowledge that in the script. Of course they do. Like each one of these Super Star Destroyers has its own little planet-destroying cannon thing on the bottom. So the stakes are that much higher, and there was an awful lot of what I'm coming to understand is the modern film and television writer's go-to crutch of the MacGuffin hunt. It was kind of a multi-nested MacGuffin hunt. You had to go to this place to find this thing, to get the quasi-mystical map that leads you to this other place to find this other thing that you then need to go to place C to translate, and then move on to place D to find the actual thing that's going to lead you to place E, which is where you actually need to go. Yeah. So structurally, I was thinking, and this is almost kind of a separate tangent also, it reminded me, I think they were drawing a little more on like the fantasy quest narrative than they were on classic war movies, which is what really ought to be.
Rogue One was a war movie.
Yes, yes. And I think a good Star Wars movie needs to have a balance between those influences, like the Joseph Campbell Hero's Quest thing that George Lucas has been so well documented as having followed. But also like classic war pictures. There's too much Harry Potter and not enough Audie Murphy, I guess. So yeah, there was a lot of stuff that reminded me of Harry Potter. There was stuff that reminded me of Indiana Jones, and the fact that I was being reminded of these disparate influences in turn reminded me of the Aquaman movie from last year. And that was kind of a mess also, structurally, but it was self-consciously absurd and therefore enjoyable. It was the kind of thing you could just unhook your brain and enjoy as a thrill ride. And I tend to hold Star Wars to a slightly higher standard than that. And so it just throwing all kinds of cool things into a script, just all those bits of fan service, stuff that they thought would be cool to see in a Star Wars movie and that they thought the fans would think would be cool to see in a Star Wars movie, without enough of a story to justify it all. I mean, you got to see the Force being used as a healing power, which is kind of interesting. You got to see stormtroopers with jetpacks. They fly now? They fly now. They fly now. Yeah, which felt like a little forcedly funny.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Yeah, just new characters being thrown in there left and right. What was his name? The Bemo Frick, the little
Yeah, I didn't get that
little
either.
puppet. They just wanted a little
droid tech.
No.
Yeah, the tiny
Yeah,
alien
yeah,
who
yeah.
did the mime,
That-
who performed the mime
Yeah.
wipe on C-3PO.
Yeah.
I think he was just thrown in there because they wanted another adorable little puppet creature that they were hoping people would embrace and buy merchandise featuring. And Carrie Russell's fairly random character.
God, I was so disappointed in that little blip. I thought she was going to do something fantastical, and that whole scene, like you said, you could have been completely pulled out of the movie.
Yep, just
Shane, you said fantastical. I just got warm and nuded inside. Thank you.
somebody for Poe Dameron to be opposite for a bit. Probably in there to like de-queer him and Finn more than anything else.
Guess, I don't know.
There were some people who were kind of shipping those two, and we never really got the confirmation of that. If anything, Zuri took things the opposite direction.
Yeah.
And then the fact that she didn't, die a tragic death when planet East Berlin, whatever it was actually called, got blown up. But
Yeah.
she and the little puppet guy, they both managed to escape.
And I'm okay with them escaping, but I thought she'd pull her helmet off. That they do.
All we got were her eyes.
I,
That was
I
it.
don't know. Yeah.
That I thought was kind of cool. That I don't know if Carrie Russell insisted on that, like she wanted the kind of a masked singer thing where she wanted the character
Maybe.
to be judged on her own performance rather than people being conscious of her being who she was.
Yeah.
Just wanted to occupy the character instead of being judged for Carrie Russell performing this role.
And that's not what I meant by that. I just thought the character was odd in the way it was written for that movie. I thought in the celebratory thing, I thought she would have taken her helmet off and just said, "Hey, something." I don't know. Just,
I thought that was kind of neat that they avoided the whole kiss.
oh no,
trope.
I didn't want that at all.
Especially so close on the heels on the kiss between
no.
Ben and Ray, which I'm one of those who thought it shouldn't have happened.
I didn't think her and Poe should have kissed. I just wanted something else out of that character that I felt we got
Well, she was
shortchanged.
also
Well,
there
yeah,
to
I'll
give,
agree with
to
you
give
there,
Poe
certainly.
to give Poe some more backstory to further flesh out his swashbuckling.
Well, and I'm
past.
okay with that. I don't know.
She should have had more to do in and of
yeah,
herself.
Yeah,
I think
and not that I think every actor that I recognize in the movie should have had more to do, because Dominic Monaghan was in it and he was in it for like all of 10 seconds. But if I was one of those actors and somebody came to me and said, "Hey, do you want to be in Star Wars?" I don't care if I'm in a stormtrooper outfit cleaning shit off a floor. I'm going to go in the movie. You know,
Some people have done exactly that.
exactly. You know, Daniel Craig was a stormtrooper. I think the Monarchy Princes were stormtroopers in The Last Jedi. I would do it in a heartbeat. But there's some stuff that I wanted more, since Carrie Russell's character had lines. I expect a little more story out of her. I just felt that was one that was shortchanged.
Yeah, I felt that way about a lot of the things that they just kind of tossed into the script here. Like they just said, here's some cool stuff we're going to put in here, and we're not going to play it out very much at all.
Yeah.
And it could, the script could easily go on without it. Answering you guys asking about Princess Leia and how her death was handled, I feel a little less complimentary about how that was done. To me, it was jarring. I thought they had their opportunity to give her a death that made sense and a death that was valiant and all of that in The Last Jedi, and instead they decided to do their stupid little Mary Poppins thing.
Oh, I won't disagree with you there.
Roundly
I
criticized.
completely agree with you there. They had plenty of time to change that and just give her a very valid death back then. Since that didn't happen, I'm okay with how they handled it in this one.
Well,
but
I'm
I
okay with-
completely agree.
The scenes she had were fine in this movie, but the death just felt kind of sudden and off the cuff and random. It's like, okay, whoops, they ran out of footage of me. I guess I have to walk off camera and die of a sudden acute case of nothing now.
Well, I took it as the way Luke performed in the last one and died. They did the same thing for her in this one.
Yeah, I can understand
So-
they're wanting to space the major character deaths out that way, but and Luke kind of had to die when he did
Oh, sure.
in The Last Jedi. So,
But I felt she gave all of herself in that same way to help save her son, which I can appreciate.
She was also saving Rey, though.
Oh,
right?
she
Because
was.
Ben was going to kill her.
Right. So
And
that
she distracted him.
and
Yeah,
that's a
yeah.
good word. Distracted him. Not that she
you're
turned
saying
him.
that she willed herself to die at that moment to have an influence on her son?
Yes, to
Yeah,
give everything she
absolutely.
could of the Force to get him to snap out of what he was doing.
Wow, I did not pick up on that
in a
at all.
last-ditch effort to stop him, because he was going to slice
gonna
her
kill her.
down.
So
I had no idea that she was dying deliberately.
Oh yeah,
Oh, yeah,
yeah,
that's
She was making a
absolutely.
sacrifice. I
Yes.
thought she'd just come down with the
No.
croup or something. And went
No. She used
okay,
the
I'm done now.
Force.
God,
She
they
used
ran-
the Force to give everything she possibly could to pull Ben out of what funk he was in with Rey's battle.
and then Rey could also
which
escape.
then
Yeah.
also gave Rey a chance to almost kill him and then snap herself out of
Yeah.
what she was doing.
A tip of the kepi to your perspicacity, gentlemen, because I did not read that at all. I just thought that they literally ran out of archival footage of Carrie Fisher, so they
I
thought,
mean, that is part of it.
now we're going to make her die.
That is part of it. They wrote it in a way that could happen, but based on how Luke used the Force in The Last Jedi, this was to a lesser degree of that feat, but in the same vein.
Okay, yes, it's a persuasive argument you make, and it does improve my opinion of the way Leia's death was handled. But I still think it would have been better if she'd just gone out
Oh, I won't disagree
a
with that.
hero in the last movie.
I won't disagree with that at all.
Well, sadly, this film was supposed to be the end of her arc
Sure.
prior to her death in real life.
Yeah.
And obviously, would have done a lot more with her character.
But I think for what they did and what they continue to do with The Last Jedi, they did this well in The Rise of Skywalker with her. And I like the flashback scene with her and Luke.
I
love that.
Yeah.
That was great.
Yeah, that was the only place where we saw what I was afraid we'd be seeing a lot more of in this movie, namely CGI zombie Leia.
Which
Yeah.
they did not really
Yeah,
do.
no.
So
Well, that one scene was the one use of it,
Yeah.
and it was dark, so it was hard. It was less glaring,
Yep.
and therefore offensive for that reason.
And again, I like her reason for not, because I always wondered why she didn't become a Jedi with Luke. I like their reasoning was because she had a premonition that if she continued on her path to be a Jedi, it would have caused Ben's death. Okay, what do? You have a son, you're doing this, you have a premonition? Okay. You try to change that path.
And one of the things I like about that aspect of this, the new trilogy, I think is very compelling, is, and this is primarily in the second film, so hats off to Rian Johnson, the creators who worked on that, is that they established that Luke never fully escaped the dark side, that no Jedi does, because what happened? He sensed the darkness in Ben, and he hesitated about,
Yeah.
killing him, and Ben wakes up seeing his master with a lightsaber over his head, so naturally he responds.
Yep.
So that led Luke to isolate himself because he felt so horrible about
That he failed.
He failed, and he was in some ways a catalyst for. Now Ben in the end is responsible for what he did himself, but that element of the story I thought was really well done.
Which given that, and given the way Rey was turning, and then once she found out she was a Palpatine, turning even more afraid of turning into that. If you take that in perspective of all 9 of these films, and you go back to how they are chronologically, you go all the way back to Anakin in Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith, where he had a premonition of Padme's death, and he actually caused everything to happen by trying to change that.
Yeah.
So you had Leia doing the same thing. It just happened to work in Leia's case, where she saved her son, whereas Anakin couldn't save Padme. He caused her to die because of everything he did. He turned to the dark side, thinking he was going to get information from the Emperor to help save her forever. No, that's not going to work because you just went the wrong way. Leia took just as big a chance with this. It just happened to work in this case. And the Force kind of pushed in that way in the right direction this time.
And then there's Rey. We haven't said all that much about her so far, but I've just say what I will about The Last Jedi. I don't agree with a number of the creative decisions made in that movie, but I got to give it credit for being, well, A, a better constructed film than the one we're talking about here, and B, the one film in this trilogy that made me actually feel something for Rey as a person, as opposed to just a vehicle for a certain progressive agenda. And in that movie, in The Last Jedi, her and her little Force Skype chats with Kylo Ren, I felt that the two characters grew a bit together as a result of those, and I kind of felt for her struggle to get Luke Skywalker to pay attention to her and give her her sense of identity and. It was almost like a little metatextual level how Rey's poorly drawn character was kind of translating in the world of the film to her struggle for identity and self-discovery. And what she discovered she didn't like, and the fans didn't like either. So this movie kind of does a radical course correct and tells us, oh, no, your parents aren't really nobody. They're the son of Palpatine himself, whom nobody knew he had, and some woman that he was involved with.
But I think actually there are comics that talk about that in past, that he had children. We just never knew much about it.
It would make sense that he might have had numerous children.
And I won't disagree. Like, I'd have been fine if her parents ended up being just nobody. I was fine with that because it gave you somebody else that was strong in the Force that wasn't a Sith Palpatine or a Skywalker. But this is not the way they went, so I'm not terribly despondent over that. I'm okay with it.
Yeah, I'm not upset at all that they changed their minds and said she was a part of a Force dynasty or legacy.
Yeah.
I mean, I agree with the point that we're trying to make that it's the sort of thing can arise spontaneously. You don't have to be part of one of the major bloodlines.
Yeah.
You can be just anybody and become Force sensitive. I agree with that, but I'm just as happy that they decided to tie her into one of the major, the biggie bloodlines in the established lore. I kind of think. I apologize, Ian, if I'm putting words in your mouth, but I think this is one of the things that Ian was a little upset about in this movie. But what I didn't like was how they went about it. It really felt tacked on, like they just kind of threw it out there. Oh, yeah, you're Palpatine's granddaughter. Yeah, and you had parents who we're not going to tell you much about. And I'm guessing they're going to leave... dollars to donuts, they'll throw that to like the comic book writers. So here's this,
or a novel down the road or something.
Here's this plot point that we just kind of spit out there in the script of this movie, amongst a whole crap ton of other stuff we spit out there. So you can develop this into a narrative that people might read and care about.
And I like the idea that other people rebel against Palpatine, not just the rebellion that his own son did. Yeah. I don't mind that, but like you said, I do hope there's a storyline that makes sense down the road with that, a novel, a comic book, something. I would like to read something like that.
I think I would too.
Now, I'm assuming she's not going to remain on Tatooine. She just went there to pay tribute.
She went there to pay tribute, to bring closures from where it all began to where it ends. Mm-hmm. Like the kids had said, well, why did they bury the lightsabers? I said, because this is not a Jedi Sith thing anymore. There are no more Sith. They are all gone. Now, if down the road they bring Sith back, I'll be terribly disappointed.
They probably will.
But this gives a closure to...
It's a symmetry.
It's
sunrise, sunset.
It's now done. What she is now, even if she calls them Jedi, they are something different now. They are back to being the protectors, the helpers, with more ambiguity with the yellow lightsaber, which is more indicative of a guardian Jedi. There's such a thing as guardian Jedis at the temples and whatnot that are like the security force, the guards. They all, for the most part, had yellow lightsabers from what I've read.
Shame.
I could be wrong, and hey, if somebody's out there, correct me. But that's how I took it. Even at Disney, in the new Star Wars land, you can go to one of the shops and you can buy what they're calling legacy lightsabers, and one of them is a guardian lightsaber that has a yellow blade, and that's what it is.
Wow, that's really cool, Shane.
So,
see, this is something that only you could have brought to this discussion.
Well, and there's a bazillion people on Facebook and online talking about this too. But
among our circle, you're the only one who could have.
So that's where I appreciate it. Yes, she took Luke and Leia's lightsaber, buried it where it belonged, to bring closure to everything that happened from the beginning of A New Hope to the end of Rise of Skywalker. The Sith are completely wiped away now and really should not, and I hope to God will not ever appear again. There could be other evils out there that could be Force sensitive, but I don't want it to be, this is a remnant of Palpatine and the old Sith, and now we're going to... It could, and if it makes sense, fine, but I like the idea of this is no longer Sith versus Jedi. This is the end. What Rey is now becoming is a guardian for the Jedi, for the helping of people in the universe. And what she will train is in that vein. And that lightsaber, not only was it kind of a nod to, Luke, the action figure, had a yellow lightsaber that there never was, so here's a yellow lightsaber. But yeah, there is past Star Wars lore that gives credence to. This is a Guardian's laser sword, not a Jedi's.
One thing I thought they didn't return, we were talking about how elements of The Last Jedi and this new movie are disjointed. At the end of Last Jedi, they established that there's an attraction between Rey and Poe when they're on the ship at the end. Like, they have that eye contact, and I think, there's some kind of attraction there. And that's just
I didn't want that either.
Yeah. I mean, which I was fine with, but it's just one of those little disjointed elements that just struck me from the second film to the third.
We're barely on camera at the same time in this one. They had that little argument over, what did you do to the Falcon? What did you do to BB-8?
Yeah, we need you here.
Yeah.
So
some of that, like forced jokes bothered me more than the way the story plot line.
And Greg Gunberg died, man. J.J. Abrams' best friend. He's in every film.
Oh yeah. I couldn't believe it. Like I thought he'd be the next Wedge to survive every battle. Like, oh my God, are you kidding me? Snap, really?
Yeah. He kills his buddy.
Speaking of Abrams, did you guys know that he was actually in the movie?
No.
Yeah, I had to do a little IMDb diving here, but J.J. Abrams was the voice of the little droid Dio.
Ah,
Oh, okay.
Cone-nosed
Okay.
guy, which I thought was pretty neat.
he's cute.
Cute little new droid, and he actually did have a small part to play in the
Yes, he
story.
did.
But it was a part in the MacGuffin hunt, which, all right, that's fine.
Yeah, but I just liked how he was resurrected by BB-8 in imitation of the act of kindness that he'd seen Rey perform on
Sure.
the giant snake.
Sure.
And so how he'd been damaged by the dark side, but by some simple quote unquote human compassion shown to
Yeah.
him by a fellow droid.
Yeah.
He was brought back into the fold, and he actually did some good for the rebel cause.
Now, I'll tell you right off the bat, I'm okay with this, but I'm going to propose it to you guys. How are you with that they can give things between the Force to get to someplace else?
It was a little strange, but I kind of accepted it actually.
Yeah,
Wait,
that's-
what?
When Kylo Ren and Rey are kind of mind linked
Neck-
through
Oh, when
the
he
Force.
grabbed the necklace.
Yeah,
Yeah,
grab the necklace,
physical
pass the
objects can be
lightsaber.
transferred in
So
space
it's a
between
plot
them.
device to move
Yeah.
the plot along. It didn't bother me one way or the other.
Okay.
Speaking of compassion, one of the scenes that really affected me and I thought was really well done was Chewbacca's reaction to the death of Leia.
Oh, thank God!
Because when Han died and he comes back and like walks by her, that all felt just wrong the way that was done.
and I think
this was really well done.
I think there was an article that JJ said he was showing in that scene. He was showing that he was more worried about Finn at that point, not that he wasn't sad about Han dying or that Leia wouldn't be affected. But Leia had the connection with Rey at that point from the Force. He was concerned about saving Finn, who had earlier saved Chewbacca or helped heal him anyway.
Yeah.
Like, so I completely agree. I was bothered by that scene in The Force Awakens, but after I read that article, it made a little bit
It
more
makes sense, but
I was
but-
glad that they showed
because
this now.
Leia is his last connection to Han.
Yeah. Yep.
And all the adventures they shared together.
Last of his old friends.
Yeah,
who,
and,
Yep,
and
yep.
you know he's 250 years old. As
Oh
a
yeah.
note.
Yeah. Yeah. I
That
really.
was well done.
I don't want to
That-
say thrilled. That's the wrong word. But
no, but it
I
affected
loved.
me because sometimes with these massive, space operatic films, it's very easy for the character moments to be lost.
Yeah.
Oh, true.
Yeah. And that was a
Indeed.
great.
and that
one.
was a good moment where I needed to see that because we grew up loving those characters,
Mhm.
and this is a testament to Lucas and Kaz and the people writing those original movies. Very quickly, the bonds between them were established,
Yeah.
and you believed those bonds,
and
you needed that scene.
again, so radically different, and maybe they're doing this on purpose, but radically different for how the previous lore in the comics and the books went, because in those, Chewbacca dies.
That's right. I
And
remember that.
and to bring it that where he's the only one that survives out of that band. I mean, there's R2 and 3PO, of course, now, but still, to have Chewbacca being the one that survived all this. Somebody had wrote online about how they couldn't believe they gave Chewbacca a medal just for his part in this battle. I'm like, no.
it's-
That was
No, no,
Han's
no.
medal that
That-
they were giving him.
Well, it's also
Because he never got his medal.
recompense
Oh,
for
right,
the medal
right.
he never got at
Right,
the end
yeah.
of the
But
first
it wasn't
movie.
that they were awarding him a medal.
Yeah,
They
it's
were
another fan
giving
service
him.
moment.
They were giving him
Yeah.
memorabilia. That's not right.
A memento.
A memento.
Yeah.
From Han. It wasn't that they were awarding him something. No. No. So.
I think and this has been my issue with these movies going back to Force Awakens, because I've really enjoyed all of them, and this is just my own thing, having grown up with the original trilogy. These movies, as much as I enjoy them, they don't have the same weight for me.
Yeah, that's
as
one of the things I thought to myself as I left the theater.
the
Today's
originals.
Star Wars ain't got the same soul.
It just doesn't. And I can't even necessarily put my finger on that completely. Part of it is just me, and because I grew up with those films.
Sure.
It's fair to say.
I mean, if I was a young kid today, I might be. Although we're growing up in a very different time, very different forms of entertainment. But
Yeah.
I might have a different take, and I might have a different take on, episodes 1, 2, and 3. If I'd seen those as a kid.
Oh,
versus
sure,
an adult.
absolutely.
Probably.
But I think one of the things why the original films have a greater weight, there's no Darth Vader. And when you watch those original films, or when you watch the end of Rogue One, which to me is still the most exciting moment in any of the new movies they've made,
I agree with that.
it's because there's something about Vader. Because Vader is a terrifying villain.
Oh, he's menacing. I mean,
and when and then the voice, James Earl Jones, the look,
Yep.
everything about that character, and then when you bring in the weight of the history, there's, and I'm not even. I like these new films, but it's that weight is what anchors those original films and makes them still so powerful for me. And Rogue One is my favorite of all the new films that they've made, and I liked it more and more as I've watched it a couple of times since I saw it when it first came out back in 2016. But that scene where he starts wading through those rebel soldiers at the end, I remember when I first saw that, I was like, oh, this is. Because I was kind of hoping they would do something like that in that movie, and they did. And it just reminded me, and still reminds me when I see it again, of how much this is really Vader's story, and just what a unique villain he is, and sort of the annals of like pop culture films, and what that character, that concept brings to these movies. And there's nothing like that in these films, and I guess there can't be because that character has been dealt with already in a sense. But
Kylo Ren was their version of giving you a next generation Vader.
There's no comparison. So
now there's a faint comparison, but not a very strong one.
Look, Adam Driver, I think, is one of the most exciting actors working in movies today. If you look at his whole career and things he's doing, and he's a very different character, and he has to be.
Yeah.
But for me, Vader just adds something that gives those movies just deeper resonance. Even when I read comics, where he's the main focus, like the Kieran Gillen series, which is amazing. They just have something about them that other stories don't have, because he's such a deeply tragic but also horrifying character.
That's one of the things I think. I love the Rebels cartoon, which I know this is kind of a tangent on this movie review. The Rebels cartoon I think is fantastic,
which I've not finished yet.
But I do think that Vader as a character and a menacing character and a villain is watered down by the Inquisitors that they have in Rebels, because they're right in the first season.
Yeah, I saw that part. Yeah.
They're okay. They're fine.
But the last episode I watched was the first episode of season 2 where they have to fight Vader. And I remember, what's the name of the young main character?
Ezra.
And Ezra goes to him. He's like, "What was that?"
Yeah.
And he goes, "It was a Sith Lord."
Yeah.
And again, you get that resonance,
and
right?
that's where I don't want them to fall back into, since that worked so well and we had Vader, we need another Sith Lord to menace these people going forward. I want them to figure something else out just as menacing.
Well, let's kind of move into that at the last part of our discussion. Where do you think they're going to go with all this now? Or are we just done? Which in some ways I'm fine with.
I don't think they're just. I think that there's a possibility they're done with having these characters all together all the time in a trilogy formation. I think there will be other trilogies, but I think they're going to go in a different direction for them. I can fully see a Rey movie coming down the road, and maybe some of these characters will make a cameo and someone will be in it, but I can't see them bringing all of them together all the time to fight everything every single time. I just don't think that'll happen. I think they're going to take a break from that for these characters.
It's not a bad idea at all.
And if there's a Rey movie where she's really bringing new Jedi to the fold and they're battling some menace, okay, fine. If it's a Poe and Finn movie and they're going up against something, that's fine. I just can't see them bringing them all together. And if they bring them all together 10 years from now for one movie, that makes sense. Okay, I just see them going in a different direction for another trilogy. They have to do something, in my opinion, to distance themselves from trilogy after trilogy after trilogy, all relating to Skywalkers and Palpatines through the whole thing now, and have to do something different. It could be, ancient Jedi and Sith, and all right, that's fine, because now you're talking about things that happened generations ago.
No, so like an ancient Jedi Order kind of prequel.
Yeah,
So that would be,
and Dark Horse did a whole series of comics.
Oh, they absolutely did.
I agree with you, Shane. Again, what takes me a little bit out of these movies, it doesn't undercut my enjoyment, is that they were really just kind of reiterating plot devices that had already been done.
Sure.
I mean,
and I think The Force Awakens was worse than all of them for that.
Well, but it was the one that I liked the most. Of this trilogy.
Rey has to fight her doppelganger, like Luke in the swamp, and you had, or when Kylo Ren's tempting her and she's on the precipice, I'm like, all right, come on, this was already done.
Yeah.
And I get it. You're trying to show, as you were referring to before, sort of the cycle of sort of the eddies of the Force, moving them in a certain direction, and that happens. But let's move away from that now and do. That's why I'm so digging The Mandalorian. That's why I'm looking forward. Aren't they doing a show with the rebel officer from Rogue One.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm really looking forward to that because
I
love that
Cassian.
that sordid side of the rebellion. Like
Yeah.
he murders the informant. Like that's the kind of stuff I want to see more of. And in fact, one of the things I liked about Last Jedi, and they totally have left that character when Benicio del Toro. He's like, well, who do you think supplies you with arms? And he shows the X-wing and the TIE fighter. I'm like, I dig that kind of stuff.
Which is why Rose hated all those people in the casino to begin with, because they were all ambiguously evil anyway.
Yeah, so let's do some more stuff like that. And Mandalorian, I've watched 8 episodes?
There's 8 episodes.
I've watched 6.
Just watched the last one last night.
Okay, I've watched 6 of 8. I'm loving it. And it's giving us a view on another part of the story, which they covered heavily in books and comics, but this is their official version.
In spite of what the Disney officials say, that there's not much out there. Well, don't even start.
What do you mean there's not much out there? What are you talking about?
There was the one Kathleen Kennedy.
Yeah, some executive over there just
said that these movies are really hard to make because there's not a whole lot of source material out there in comics and books. And I'm like,
what?
Are you freaking kidding me? There are hundreds of both.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
There's a trove of source material.
Apparently, they're only aware of things that have been created since they took ownership.
Yeah. And that's fine to do.
All the stuff that had been done in the interim, all the novels and comics and things, didn't count because they were produced under the Disney banner.
And I don't mind that they don't use them as canon, but there's definitely stories out there from that time.
I want to see a Thrawn show, for God's sake. I mean, that's begging to be made. It would be so well done.
A what show?
Thrawn, Grand Admiral
Oh,
Thrawn.
right. Heir to the Empire, that whole sequence, yes.
Which is still my favorite series of books. Yeah.
Yeah, they were just what the fandom needed at the time.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Any other closing comments?
We are expecting. I mean, I think Rian Johnson's been promised a trilogy of his own to helm.
I think that died
at some point. Oh, it did?
I do. I think that went by the wayside.
And was that because of negative reaction to The Last Jedi?
Quite
or
possibly, but I think he's on tap to direct an episode of the second season of Mandalorian or something down the road. So it's not that he's out there, and maybe it's still going, but everything I read was that was put on the back burner.
Yeah, because I think if he would be. I mean, again, despite what problems I may have had with The Last Jedi, if we're talking about needing to move the Star Wars franchise in some unexplored directions,
I think he could
doing
do
some
it.
unexpected and non-derivative things, he would be happy to do that.
And let's not forget,
he just did a little too much of it in the middle of another person's very reverent and nostalgic story.
And it was originally not supposed to be J.J. directing the third one either. It was supposed to be a different director each time.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. But then
I don't think that was wise of whoever made that decision. It should have been a single directorial vision governing the entire thing, because otherwise it would have. I mean, it already feels a little bit haphazard to me. Each of the 3 movies going in a different direction.
Well, it worked okay for Star Wars Empire and Jedi because Lucas did the first one.
But he oversaw all of that.
Yes,
he oversaw all of it.
Yeah.
In the second trilogy, which was really the prequel trilogy, Lucas did all of them, and that was fine because it's his vision. You know, he owned it all. Who cares? It's his. And this one, I think they should have either done with J.J. doing all 3, because I think we would have gotten a different second and third part. And by this third part, we may have gone in a different direction, given if he had done all 3 of them. But it just wasn't the way that they
A trilogy of Star Wars films in any kind of very important entertainment franchise like this is not a place to perform an exercise in round-robin storytelling.
Yeah.
You need a single guiding hand if you want it to be in any way coherent.
And we should also, I forgot to mention this earlier, there's going to be an Obi-Wan show.
Oh, I can't wait for that.
Which I'm so excited for. And again, when we talk about source material, there's so many eras in the saga, like Obi-Wan and Tatooine all those years, that can be explored and it can be so rich or how many Darth Vader stories can you do, right? Yeah. I mean, and Marvel's done such a wonderful job with the comics they've been doing in recent years, going into a lot of that. So there's so much that can be minor, that can be exciting. And Murder made a great point. I want some stuff that is not derivative. Like, let's take us into some exciting directions.
Yeah.
You can. I understand the whole fan service because it's a multi-billion-dollar property and all that stuff, but you can still take some risks and do some interesting stories.
And I think that's what they did with Rogue One and Solo. Now, I know a lot of people that didn't like Rogue One. I don't understand that. I loved Rogue One.
I think all of us in this room did.
Yeah.
And I don't understand people that hated Solo, because I thought that was a fun movie too.
Like Solo.
It's easier for me to understand why people are down on Solo, but I, like the rest of you guys in this room, also enjoyed it for what it was.
Yeah, and I love what Ron Howard did with it. kind of think that they're also thinking about a Lando show with what's his name?
Glover?
Oh, he was fantastic.
Yeah, he was fantastic.
Fantastic.
So
He's reciting his memoirs.
Well, maybe we'll get an older Lando and Janna series, which is what Chris thought they might be hinting at with that confusing little scene between the two.
I really hope that they give us a second Solo part because I want to know what happens with everything that came from that movie too. I don't want to say more because maybe somebody didn't watch it yet, but
there are some spoilers that could be.
yeah. So I think that there's definitely good in the directions they've gone with these new movies, but I'd be glad if they ended this episode 9 and now they go in another direction. Again, if they go back to Sith Jedi thing, I want it to be from millennia before. I want something else. I want worlds of Sith and worlds of Jedi and things that happened in the ancient times of these two factions. I don't want something even remotely close to the rebellion in the Empire.
So they'd have to be very creative to come up with a completely new antagonist.
Yeah, in some way. I mean,
Well, tell us about Darth Plagueis.
right, and that's that's a little bit too close for my taste.
Yeah,
for the Emperor.
it's still a Darth,
Yeah, but there's countless stories that were told, again, not canon anymore, but with a whole race of Sith and battling constantly, just much like Klingons battled each other, the different houses, different factions of Sith battling each other because they each wanted supremacy, and that's where eventually they dwindled down to just
Master and
one or
apprentice.
two. Yeah. But you're talking generations ago, so I don't necessarily want that and only that because I don't think you need to pigeonhole Star Wars to being just a Jedi and a Sith thing, but I'd be okay if they explored a little bit.
Sure.
But I want other stuff too. I'm excited for this Obi-Wan, this Cassian and K2SO. That's going to be in the show. Alan Tudyk is coming back as
great.
K2SO, as far as I know. So that's stuff I'm excited for down the road.
Yeah. All kinds of different directions they can go.
Yeah.
Galaxy is wide and diverse.
Yeah.
Shall we rate, gentlemen?
I'll still give it a 4 out of 5. I still enjoyed the hell out of it.
I give it a 3.5 out of 5.
I gave it a 3, and that's really the best I can do. I mean, I got some enjoyment out of it. As I said before, there were moments that resonated with me. I got some thrills, but I came away from the whole thing feeling curiously empty inside. Like it just didn't hang together very well as a movie or a Star Wars movie, and consequently, the entire trilogy kind of felt like it fell flat in the end. So, yeah, it was a Star Wars movie. It could have been worse, but my feelings are mixed. Too bad. And while I enjoyed it more than The Last Jedi, I must concede that The Last Jedi, in the final examination, was actually a better made film.
The notion of Murd being curiously empty inside is almost terrifying.
It happens more often than I'm willing to concede, Chris.
And one last thing we didn't mention, in addition to, I almost said Leia, to Rey bearing the lightsabers, taking the name of Skywalker now to totally bury the Palpatine legacy means something to me, too, that she's doing it in not only homage of Luke and Leia, who both were her masters, but also to take this universe into a different direction now. That you have to remember the heroes that the Skywalker line is not everything that Anakin became with being Darth Vader, not everything the Emperor did and the Palpatine legacy. Again, going with that whole Jedi Guardian thing going forward, she's something different now. She's more than just a Jedi.
Shane, they got to bring you into the writer's room.
Well,
Yeah, it's also expressive of a theme that pops up in entertainment a lot and is popular with like millennial and Gen Z consumers of entertainment, and that's the definition of family and familial identity as self-determined. You know, family is not just blood; it's not just the people who you're related to. It's the family you choose to belong to, and so that's Rey determining for herself which familial legacy.
she's going to live her life in the light, so to speak.
Yeah, she had that little scene on the Burning Man planet between the little alien girl who wanted to know her family name, and she tearfully said, "Oh, I don't have a family name. I'm just Rey." And in the end, she chooses a family name for herself rather than simply adopting or enduring the one that fate has imposed on her, that of Palpatine.
Yeah.
She decides that she is a Skywalker, and she's going to rise in that role.
Yep.
Flash, late edition. Just in addition to all the remarks that you have heard thus far, we have just gotten in touch with Ian Levinstein, and he's ready to share some of his thoughts on Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker.
Hey guys, sorry I couldn't be there for the main portion, but glad I get at least a little bit of time to spout my opinions.
Oh, we're happy to listen to you spout, Ian.
Yeah, spout away.
All right. Okay, so I was a huge fan of The Last Jedi, to the point where it may be one of my top 2 favorite Star Wars movies, or top 3. I really enjoyed a lot of the aspects that were introduced into the whole continuity in that one. I appreciated the scope and the grounded storytelling and the character building and the introduction of new characters, and the fact that it did the unexpected and led you in directions that you weren't necessarily thinking you were going to go after what was late in Episode 7. You know, it was intelligent enough and strong enough to go, yeah, you think you know what direction it's going? Well, guess what? It's not. And it moved on from there. And I appreciated that. And that's my biggest reason why I was not the hugest fan of the latest movie. I think that it's a perfectly acceptable solution, and it makes sense in a pleasing factor for the general fan. But at the same time, it also jettisons some of my favorite parts of The Last Jedi. You know, the fact that, we learned that Rey is just another girl. I love that idea. The fact that anybody could be a Jedi, and they even introduced that with the final scene of The Last Jedi, which this Rise of Skywalker movie completely ignores, and we don't see any more, Jedi children or potential Jedi children or Force-laden children show up, or basically anybody else Force except for Finn, which was hinted at in previous movies. I just felt like it was trying to please literally everybody, and that was its main purpose for existing, rather than actually advancing the story. And that's, I think, the biggest shortcoming and shortfall of the movie. I mean, I don't know. Obviously, I haven't heard your guys' thoughts on it, but I don't know whether, agree or disagree or what have you. I'd love to hear what you guys, think about that portion.
Well, I'm kind of glad to hear that is your thought about this, Ian, because I'm glad that we have some input from somebody who liked The Last Jedi more than the three of us did.
Yeah.
Because I had to admit, and you'll hear me admit this in the course of our previously recorded remarks, but although I found that I enjoyed this one maybe a little more than I did The Last Jedi on one level, on a different level, I have to admit that I thought The Last Jedi was actually a better made movie. And I think we're all in agreement that we're glad that it tried to do something new with the Star Wars concepts, even if we didn't necessarily all approve of what those new things were.
Right.
And my bigger problems, and you'd hear this as well, that with the Last Jedi, my problem wasn't with Luke and Rey's story, because I love that. My problem was the casino kind of was a waste, a very big MacGuffin chase. If you fix that, you put it where they find Lando in that scene, you fix that whole scene for me. If the First Order is chasing the rebellion and they can't do anything to overtake them, that seems silly.
Fair. Yeah.
I like that they attempted something new, but I think they did better with the Rey and Luke and Ben and Snoke and that side of the world in that movie than anything else.
Mm-hmm. No, that's a fair assessment. However, considering the Rose Tico aspect that was introduced in The Last Jedi, I felt like she was completely ignored in this movie, and it's disappointing. I know that some stuff was apparently on the cutting room floor from her being left behind to be around with what bits of Leia they had to work with.
Yeah,
but it's sad to see a character that had such potential down to like a minute and 30 of a 2.5 hour movie.
Yeah, I want to see them do something with her down the road, whether it be a show, a movie, a special, something. I think that character deserves something.
Yeah, I'm actually going to agree here. I don't agree that they completely ignored her. I mean, they did at least give her that minute 30. They could have left her out completely.
Sure.
They could have killed her.
Right.
They could have reduced her to comedy relief, but instead, they gave her a couple, fairly dignified little lines of dialogue to say. And I agree with you guys. I wanted to see them do a little bit more with her, if only to, my word here, redeem her, because I thought she kind of made a complete fool of herself in The Last Jedi. Probably my least favorite part of that whole movie was that bit where she stopped Finn from making his run on the Death Star cannon, and then she, spewed that little bit of hogwash about, that's how we're going to win, not by destroying what we hate, but by saving what we love. Yeah. It's called Star Wars, lady. It's nice that you want to protect what you love, but that often involves destroying that which threatens it. So, grow up a little. And I was hoping that maturation process might be reflected in her character in the last the Rise of Skywalker. But instead, they backburnered her, and that is kind of a shame.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and obviously my other bit that I really have a problem with is the whole Palpatine stuff. It felt tired in possibly the worst way, and you take that out of the movie, and frankly, I probably would have enjoyed this whole thing a lot more. It's just that it felt like, well, they disposed of Snoke, so we need a big bad. So let's go with the biggest of bads. And they didn't even really bother to explain it that well. Mm-hmm. And it's just like an also ran, and it takes away from Rey a little bit from me. Because like I said, I actually really appreciate the fact that she, was a quote unquote nobody. And then she's, of course she's a somebody because she's literally the quote unquote granddaughter of the biggest Sith Lord there ever was. So it's a bit to take in.
Yeah,
I'm okay with it because it's how it is. I would not have minded if they would have just left her as somebody new that is very powerful in the Force. But since they wrote this the way it is, I didn't mind the way they explained it or showed it in this movie, and I enjoyed it very much. But I did feel like they kind of pulled back from their risk-taking about it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's exactly how I feel. And even like the bits that we got with the Emperor, like so much is left to the imagination because of things that were cut from the movie itself. Like I know that there was an earlier draft of the movie apparently where they explained that she was basically created from quote unquote midichlorians like Anakin was. And that she's basically a miraculous birth. Because frankly, I do not want to have the idea of Palpatine having sex with anybody in my head. That's a bit. It's a bit too much even for me to take in. But at the same time, it just muddies the waters even further as to so how exactly is she the granddaughter?
I'd rather the idea that he has had sex than midichlorians though.
Well, yes.
Yeah, one virgins is enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's perfectly fair. The idea of it just skeeves me out.
I think I said it in the earlier part of the episode, the recordings, that I think there's something out there, comics, books, something that talks about children he did have, but there's not much out there about it. And of course, it's not canon any longer since Disney's taken over, but. I don't mind it. It doesn't surprise me, and I'm again glad the way that they ended up bringing it all together in the end. But that doesn't mean that I wouldn't have been satisfied if they just would have left her as some new generation of Jedi without being somebody's relative.
Right. Yeah. And I completely I'm there. It screamed way too much of people didn't enjoy The Last Jedi. Well, let's sweep as much of that as possible under the rug. While at the same time also embracing other things like increased force powers, because obviously Super Leia in The Last Jedi, and now we get the introduction of force healing and what have you outside of the legacy Star Wars materials, and also the cartoons, and a little bit in the Mandalorian. You're definitely seeing increased force powers showing up more in the movies, which is a thing. Plus, the other thing that rubbed me a little bit off in this one, rubbed me the wrong way, because rub me off is not exactly what I wanted to say. Right. But rubbed me the wrong way in this was. I like that they gave Finn stuff to do, I didn't like how blatantly it seemed that they were shooting for like a Disney Plus or a spin-off with the the new former stormtroopers introduced in this movie, like especially like the hanging the lantern on it at the end with Lando, with like, do you know who you are? Well, I guess we should go find out. Wink. To be continued somewhere down the line on Disney Plus, probably.
Yep.
Like it just,
Yeah.
it was a bit much.
Yeah, Chris arrived at about the same conclusion.
Yeah.
And I think that's something else that was on the cutting room floor. I read about an expanded version of that scene that made a little bit more sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't know. The Last Jedi was intellectually stimulating for me. That's probably the best way for me to put it. Like, even though it's not a perfect movie, even though it's not, it didn't do everything that, absolutely perfect and in a typo. I mean, mind you, in some ways, Empire Strikes Back didn't, and that's still, I think, my favorite of the entire crew. It's just that this felt more like JJ appeasing everybody and trying to, tie everything that he put forth together, which is great. It's just, that you lose the middle part in that factor. And I've never been a fan of JJ's endings in general. His ending for Alias was trash. He left Lost behind, and because of that, Lindelof was forced to try to put the pieces together and form an ending, even though JJ never put forth an ending. And even the endings to some of his movies have just felt off. And I think that this is another instance where, second Star Trek movie, also a perfect example, Into Darkness, just not working as a return. I think JJ should stick to starting things. And I also think I'd like him to sort of just create his own stuff from this point forward. Probably shy away from some existing, franchises for a bit, and maybe, let his creativity flourish in some new spaces, rather than muddy the waters in existing spaces.
Well, speaking of people creating their own stuff, earlier on, we raised the subject of that Star Wars trilogy that was supposedly going to be given to Rian Johnson, and Shane thought he'd heard that had fallen through. Can you confirm that, Ian?
We have not had official confirmation that it has fallen through, and Rian Johnson has not said as much. They've been very mum in general about where we're going next with Star Wars, especially with the Benioff and the Game of Thrones guys leaving and what have you. Their movies were supposed to come first, and then Rian's, and now that that's not happening, we frankly have no idea where Star Wars is going next. I'm kind of okay with that right now because. For me, the Mandalorian finale was a much better finale than than Rise of Skywalker was. So I'm just looking forward to next fall for that. But yeah, we have no idea whether Rian Johnson's still on board. All I know about Rian Johnson is that he's already formulating a sequel to Knives Out, which is one of my favorite movies of the year, if not my favorite movie of the year. One of the best Agatha Christie-esque, detective stories you can possibly see. And that's the creativity he brings to that. If he can continue to bring that creativity to Star Wars in a potential trilogy, then who the heck knows what we're going to see, Jedi or not. But yes, there has been no confirmation one way or the other that I'm aware of, whether or not he's still doing that trilogy.
All right. All we can do is stay tuned on all frequencies.
Yep, basically. And I'm kind of okay also with not really having much Star Wars movies in the next couple of years because I'm suffering from severe burnout.
You're not alone, my friend.
Yeah, I barely have enough energy to look forward to Black Widow, let alone another Star Wars movie. So I'll just look forward to Mandalorian Season 2.
Yeah. And I'll look forward to seeing Mandalorian Season 1 eventually when it shows up on a platform
that you can watch,
available to troglodytes like myself.
Like I said, if you need to at some point borrow a login or what have you and watch it on a laptop, I'll make that happen just because it's a damn good season of television. Really and the last episode was directed by the same individual who directed Thor Ragnarok. Yeah. So it's it's got a whole bunch of personality to it.
It actually plays IG-11.
Yep, Taika
Waititi. Yeah. Yeah, by all accounts, it sounds like the kind of Star Wars that I've been yearning for, actually.
Yeah.
And
it's been really good.
Takes it back to the original concept of just paying homage to the kind of old westerns and things that Lucas grew up watching. So this is like a Star Wars, just as the original Star Wars was kind of like the old western serials. Mandalorian is more like a spaghetti western.
Absolutely.
And not to spoil anything, but there is even some aspects of Mandalorian that touch on, the original extended universe and the animated shows in some ways, and introduce some things in that were not in Star Wars beforehand. So it's cool that they're reaching out as far as they can go.
Awesome.
Yep.
So can you give us a frickin' swear rating for Rise of Skywalker then, Ian?
Ooh, it's difficult. I think I've only seen it once so far, and I will say as well that this is of this trilogy, and I don't know if you guys agree or disagree with this, or how many times you've seen it already, but this is the first movie that I did not immediately come out of saying, I need to see this again. I saw Force Awakens like 8 times in theaters.
Jeez.
And I had problems with the movie, but it was still like popcorn fun. And Last Jedi I saw 3 times in theaters. This one I don't think I'm going to see again for a while, unless I can go on a Tuesday for $5 or what have you. So I think at this point, I unfortunately am probably going to give it about 2.5 frickin' swears. I think that I'd give the trilogy as a whole about 3.5, approaching 4 out of 5, just for the 2 movies that came beforehand. Plus for Rogue One and Solo was for me, but so it goes. I was having part of this, but 2.5. I hope I'll feel different after repeated watchings. It's just it just didn't do for me what I wanted a conclusion to do, and I understand I'm in some ways in the minority of fans here, and critics are very split. It was like 55% on Rotten Tomatoes, if I remember correctly. But it's just I hope for more, and I hope I do get more in future Star Wars movies.
Yeah, I'll say I liked it considerably more than you did.
Yep,
that's fair. Yeah,
yeah. I think we were. It was kind of like a continuous downward line.
Yeah, from me going down.
Just if you were going to chart them all on a Cartesian plane, it would just be like a downward slope as far as our opinions and our ratings.
Shane, my friend, you are the most positive human being I know when it comes to any sort of like sci-fi or fantasy movie, basically. And I know you just enjoy being enjoyed, and going in there and having a good time. And if you had a good time, man, I am beyond thrilled. And there were parts of this movie that I was having a damn good time with too. Mm-hmm. I feel like it was, it as a whole, it just could have been a better experience for me.
Yeah. Yep, I can understand that.
You know me, I'm in touch with my negativity pretty strongly, and I gave this only half a frickin' swear more than you did. I
fair enough.
I got a few cheap thrills along the way, but on the whole, even though I objected to some of the stuff that was done in The Last Jedi, it was probably a better movie than this one was.
Yeah, and I actually have more of a feeling that I'm going to go back and watch The Last Jedi again on Netflix, or when it comes on Disney Plus in like 3 days, just to watch that again and remember the parts that I enjoyed, and then maybe for all I know I'll think differently of the third movie once I go ahead and see it. So who the heck knows?
Let me see. Something you just said interests me.
Mm-hmm.
The Last Jedi is on Disney Plus now.
Oh, great.
Came
okay,
on,
well, there you go.
The other day I was watching it. I was surprised it was there.
Yeah, it's that had a different, I think Star Wars in general had a different license agreement with Netflix than the Marvel stuff. So I think Marvel stuff doesn't come for another year. So you'll still have Thor Ragnarok and a couple of the other movies on Netflix, but Star Wars I think is now officially all in the playhouse of Disney Plus.
I think Solo is the only one we're waiting for yet. I don't think it's on Disney Plus yet, but beyond that. Yeah,
that sounds about right. Yep. Alrighty, well, glad I got to get my 2 cents in here, and hopefully I didn't, make too many people mad at me with my comments. But I think I was actually nicer than I thought it was going to
be. I said it at the end of what we recorded. Everyone's entitled to their opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, most definitely. Yeah, and I'm very much looking forward to some hearty conversation on the Facebook group. As I think once this episode gets released, we're going to put out an official spoiler thread on that where we can discuss it in full and see what everybody's opinions were.
Okay.
Sounds like a plan.
Sounds good.
All right. Thanks, guys.
All right. Well, thank you,
Thanks,
Ian.
Ian.
Thanks for fitting this in while you're entertaining.
My pleasure. My pleasure. I'll talk to you all soon.
Take care.
All right.
Thanks.
Yep.
All right,
Very good. Okay.
brothers, it was an honor.
Yeah. All good.
And a pleasure. All right. Ready to take us out, Shane?
Ready and willing.
All right.
Visit us at comicgeekspeak.com to send an email. The address is comicgeekspeak@gmail.com. To leave a voicemail, the number is 267-702-6642. Stop by thecomicforums.vanillacommunity.com for all of your interactions and let us know what you think. I know people will disagree with me. That's okay.
People will disagree with
Entitled to their
everybody. Don't worry
opinion.
about that.
Follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook. Thanks to everyone who contributes to the show. We appreciate it. And as always, we are uniting the world's mightiest heroes, one listener at a time.
You got it on Wednesday, and you was psyched about it, going to the volume up. These guys will talk about it, everything the geeks love. From cakes to laser beams, opinions like the seasons, and everything you read in comics, movies, games, toys, artists, comic geek speak, comic geek speak, comic geek speak, comic geek speak, comic geek. Uniting the world.